open hour. My name is Danielle, and I'm happy to host this conversation on the topic of soil testing and analysis with many guests. We wanted to let you know that we will be recording this so that others can learn from this conversation as well. And that'll be available on the Public Lab website. Is that right? Okay. We'll hit record in a minute. Yeah, Liz is ready. Okay, Liz is helping us out by taking some notes about this conversation and helping with the recording. So we have scheduled this call for an hour, and we may go a little bit over, but feel free to drop off at the top of the hour as you need to. And so I wanted to start with a round of short introductions. So I'll call on you, and please share your name, where you're calling from, your affiliation, and one phrase that brings you here today. I like being able to see people's faces. This is great. Okay. So can we start with Bronwyn?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Bronwyn. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York. I'm a member of the Public Lab staff, and I guess, yeah, what brings me here is curiosity. I'm always interested in tools and methods. I know a little bit about this stuff, but I am excited to know more.
Thank you. Liz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Liz Barry. I'm also calling in from Brooklyn, New York, about 4 feet away from Bronwyn. And I'm part of the Public Lab staff, and I'm here on this call. Thanks. Did we need that? Did we need that? I'm here on this call to do my job, which is helping the broad decentralized community work together better. Thank you.
Okay. Jackie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jackie James Creedon, and I'm with a community group called Citizen Science Community Resources in Tonawanda, New York, which is a suburb north of Buffalo. And we developed a soil sampling toolkit, and we've been working with Public Lab, I don't know, over a year. And when ideas in developing this toolkit, it's ready. We have it up on our website for pilot sales, I guess, beta test sales of the kit. And Evan from our group attended the barn raising, and he came back and told me a lot of interesting updates regarding soil testing. So I'm here because I want to hear it myself. I'm excited to learn too. Curiosity.
Thank you. Next, I see there's an 815908 number. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, hi, Nancy.
Okay. Yeah, it's Nancy. Nancy Clem from Northern Illinois. I work with social ecology. It's a somewhat loose group of people, and we work on soil and water systems, regenerative systems for people, but we also do work around remediation and recreating coherence in soil structure and soil microbiology. And I'm here because I'm curious.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, Corey, would you like to introduce yourself?
We're not hearing that.
Oh. Okay. Corey, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Corey. Eleanor, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just figuring out the buttons. I'm calling from New Orleans, and I'm half of a small quarter-acre urban farm in New Orleans called Speak Easy Farm, and we do vegetable and herb growing, but are increasingly a platform people from the public come to learn about gardening. And so I get a lot of questions about soil testing and contaminants. And we took an introductory set of microscope classes to try and start to learn how to assess soil life. So both of those things make me want to learn more about both stuff for us to be able to better understand soil life, but also good ways to communicate with people that come to us and are just curious to get like lead tested for their soil, for example.
Thank you. Mimi?
Hello. Hi guys. My name is Mimi. I am also a part of the Public Lab team. I'm working with our education department, and I'm here to learn more about kind of your soil testing work to see kind of how to implement that in a K-12 classroom. I am sorry I have my video off. I'm also eating lunch, and I'm mortified at the thought of eating on camera. So I will pop back on if I'm like speaking out loud, but otherwise I'll stay behind my like nice little black name where you can't see me munching.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay. Corey, did you want to introduce yourself now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome, Corey. If you want to type a little intro into the chat, also just letting everyone know, if you can't see, on the right side of your Zoom screen, there is a chat box, so we can drop links for each other in there and ask questions and stuff in there as well.
Can you hear me like this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Corey. I'm also calling from Brooklyn. Calling on behalf of a project called Carbon Sponge. That's just like running tests at the New York Hall of Science, testing methods of carbon sequestering, and just running a series, kind of focusing on making available, accessible tests to test just various aspects of soil quality that can be linked to how much carbon can be stored. So we're both interested in learning more, but also sharing what we've developed so far and some of the low-tech solutions that we have. And I'll say my word is simplicity, because I'm not coming from any science background with my involvement in the project. So I really love getting those protocols that I can take part in that doesn't require that much knowledge of what's actually going on, as I don't have.
Cool. Thank you so much, Corey. It's great. Is there anyone I missed? Stevie. Stevie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, sorry, I've been wondering why nobody's heard me.
Oh,
it's okay. I was like trying to help Corey out. Yeah, sorry. I'm Stevie. I'm calling in from Miami. We had a soil call a couple of years ago, I think, and I'm excited to hear some updates, because I think we left that call wondering a little bit about what some opportunities were around low-cost monitoring, and I think there's even more now. So I'm excited to hear some updates on that.
thank you. Okay, is there anybody I missed?
I can go ahead. This is
Oh,
Jeff.
Jeff.
I'm in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm also part of the Public Lab nonprofit, and I try to help people get their different project ideas and kit ideas and methodologies up on the site often to share with other people.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there anybody else I missed? I'm sorry, I may not be seeing everybody. Okay.
I'm gonna take Nancy off of mute, but
Okay.
if her line is still noisy, I'll put Nancy back on mute.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, again, my name is Danielle. I've been a fellow with Public Lab over the past few months, trying to pull together some resources around soil testing, and it sounds like we're all here for some similar reasons. There's a lot of potential to continue to develop low-cost, sort of more accessible citizen science methods and tools for analyzing our soils, whether it's for contaminants or microbial life, soil health, or other soil characteristics that can save us a lot of money, because a lot of soil testing is currently still done through academic institutions and labs or professional labs. So I wanted to propose that we do round robin, sharing some of our methods and the pros and cons of these methods in a few different key categories around soil. So the ones I wanted to propose were soil contaminants, so metals and organic contaminants. We could talk about soil microbial life. We can talk about other soil characteristics like soil texture, pH, and maybe some qualitative analyses as well. I think it's so cool that Corey does soil carbon sequestration stuff. I'd love to add that in as well. Would anyone like to propose another aspect of soil testing, like things we might want to test for in soil that I didn't cover so far?
Well, it's my experience that there's a lot of techniques, inexpensive techniques to test for microbials and pH, nitrates, things like that. There's a real need for environmental contamination, testing environmental contamination in soil, especially lead. So, I mean, that's just my preference to, to talk about that, heavy metals, PAHs, and the emergent chemicals like the PFOAs. I really see that there's a big, as we move forward, there's a big need for that type of testing that's not available inexpensively right now.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I think that's a great starting place.
Great.
Okay.
And on a quick facilitator's note, I want to welcome a new joiner, Severin. Hi.
Hi, Severin.
I'm sorry, I got the time zone confused.
Fair enough. Totally understandable. Severin, we just did a quick round of introductions, just our name, where we're calling from, and sort of what brings us here. Did you want to
Sure.
share a little introduction?
Sure, I'm here at the Sunrise on Molokai in Hawaii, and I am part of the Farm Hack community, and as a young farmers organizer for the last 15 years. I just come back from New Zealand, where there's a major push for regenerative ag conversion from conventional dairy management systems and pasture towards biological systems. And there's been work monitoring the nitrogen impact, which are far greater than that predicted by the conventional software, which is called Overseer, which is owned in part by the New Zealand government and in part by the fertilizer company. And so this new accountability has allowed the iwi, the indigenous, to sharply curtail the use of nitrogen in their fields, and has prompted them to make management decisions on their large land holdings under their treaty rights. So there's very interesting political will at the very top of New Zealand, political will within the Maori, and new tools being deployed. So that's a community that I'm in support of. and I'm interested to listen to everybody else.
Thanks, Severin. Okay. And thanks, Liz, for welcoming in new folks on the call. So I'd like to dive into the conversation and propose the round robin style. Of course, you can pass if you don't have something to contribute on the topic. And I do like the idea of starting with testing for soil contaminants, as Jackie sort of flagged. I wanted to add to, I'm not sure how many of you have seen the spreadsheet we created. I dropped it into the group chat. If you did want to open that either now or add into that later on, we're trying to make some of this, we're trying to harvest from sort of all of us who are practicing soil analysis and share that out via Public Lab. So feel free to contribute to that. And for visual learners, I did pull some slides together and for different methods. So I'll probably just try to share those as they come up. But let's dive in. So on the topic of soil testing and analysis of contaminants, so lead, other heavy metals, organic contaminants, why don't we share what methods we use to test for these, or methods we've heard of? Has anyone done any soil testing or analysis for lead or for other soil contaminants?
Well, we've done, yeah, I mean, that's what we do here. But we send the samples to the laboratory. So our kit samples the soil properly. We teach folks how to, with well-established protocols and procedures. So from our experience, there's still, unfortunately, I mean, people say that that still is a roadblock of sending the samples to the laboratory because of the expense. The expense is just a roadblock in period in soil testing. But from what I see so far, I mean, as far as the precision and accuracy, and opposed to the cost and the quality of the results, I still think the laboratory is the way to go. But I know there's XRF, there's the HANBI, but again, we're talking about there's a price barrier. It's a huge price barrier.
Mm-hmm. Jackie, do you know offhand roughly what it costs to send a sample to the lab?
Well, we also suggest that you can work with a local university. So if folks are working with a local university, it could be free. So I would think that would be the best way to go. If you can use the, something, you could build our kit. It's open source. You can build it yourself if you want to. It costs maybe about $80, $85 to put together. You can use it again and again. And if you team up with a local university that will test your samples, it's free. But if you do send it off to like Test America, we've partnered with, to test for lead is $30. To test for the RECRA metals, which are the 8 metals, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, lead. I can't remember the other few, but that's $80. So still, I think it's a bargain.
Thanks. Thanks, Jackie. Has anybody gotten soil testing done, soil analysis done through a university partnership?
I recently got to use XRF, portable XRF at a community garden that also someone involved in the carbon sponge project, separate from that, was just making it available through CUNY, and they just brought it to a garden and just invited anyone to come by with samples. And that was the first I've ever experienced something like that, but that was fantastic. Previously, it's been sent to labs. I think it was also around $30 at the Urban Soils Institute, which has, for my community garden, has been kind of a barrier to do it as frequently as we'd like to do it with all of the areas of our garden that we were trying to do it with. But yeah, the university partnership thing, or just having someone at the university that just has access to it, that just decided to take control over their ability to bring it around places and just do on-site tests. So it was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I know in the Boston area, a lot of friends of mine have sent into the UMass Amherst Soil Lab, which has, I think, similar pricing. Although I'd have to double check, but they have a lot of different tests available. And then now I live in Providence, and someone this weekend just mentioned that the University of Rhode Island also offers testing, and a lot of people from community gardens will go do that, or will send it in for that. I know there's been some discussion about, like, I think, what is it, like land grant universities often offer discounted testing. So there's some interest, I think, that I've heard in, like, compiling a list of just where the closest local places. Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn. Although, you know, honestly, by, like, if you're sending it by mail, it almost doesn't matter, like, where it is, if it's in the, like, if it's in the same country as you. Like, I mean, within the U.S., I guess things vary probably quite a bit out there. So,
Thank you. Yeah, I'll mention as well, I started a program in Canada where I'm from in Victoria. It's a partnership with a university that has an environmental science program. So their students need to do, like, build science skills anyways. And so it's ongoing, and it's amazing because they're able to offer free soil contaminant testing for farmers and gardeners. And I think we've done like 500 sites at this point. And so it's, yeah, a great way to go. I'm also a student in a soil chemistry lab right now in California. And I just got trained in how to use, like, the mass spectrometer and the, like, desktop XRF, and I was like, does it cost like, can I just run this? And my lab was like, yeah, of course, it's, like, not expensive to use, so I can be that person for some of you now as well. It just takes time, of course, to run the samples, but I think if you have friends in university labs, it can be a good way to go.
An experience I've had with getting lead test done in New Orleans is it being wonderful once you get that in with someone who will help you, or when the city is pushing it or a university is pushing it, but it feels vulnerable to change over the years. Like the Baton Rouge lab used to very visibly advertise cheap lead testing, and I went looking for it this month to answer questions from a lot of students and couldn't find anything on their website anywhere about lead testing. And I may not be finding it, but it feels like it may also have disappeared as a easy public option. And I'm not sure why it's subject to that amount of change, but I think that's one reason why making something that feels a little more consistently available at a low cost feels important. Because if you look up nationally, sort of the most available options, they're $60, $70, $80 per to send in one sample for lead testing through, like, UPenn or Colorado, from what I remember looking up this month.
Thanks, Eleanor. That's such a good point. Does anybody have experience with other options for soil testing for contaminants that don't involve that are a bit more affordable or don't involve a professional or university lab?
Mimi, you were raising your hand earlier.
Yeah, so kind of a weird, maybe not weird to you guys, but side project that my husband and I have been working on in our home. So we just bought a house. We're here in New Orleans, and it's an old house. And when we were doing construction, we ended up having to use companies to help us remove the plaster and things because there was lead and we were worried about contaminating other things. So we did some commercial soil testing of our backyard, places where we were hoping to like actually plant something that we could eat. Then kind of those test results came back in a manner that we were like, maybe we don't want to eat something that we grow right here. So something that we've been doing kind of for a quick and dirty so we read up on kind of some like remediation like options for lead and other heavy metals in our soil. And we planted a bunch of different things that everyone's like, hey, like plant these things and like they can pull some of these metals out of your soil. But we did not want to go through the cost of then testing these plants afterwards. So what we've done that, maybe is not the most scientific, but has been interesting for us to be able to visually see is so we've planted a couple of different things. Kind of the big ones that we've been doing lately have been kind of really leafy greens. So we've been plucking the leaves and then kind of mushing them up and then just smearing them on a paper. And then we bought these little like things that are supposed to test for the presence of lead, like in paint and pipes. It looks like a tube of like chapstick, and you can get them at like Home Depot for $12. And we've been kind of just letting our smears dry and then rubbing them with this lipstick. And we are noticing that, things are coming back, with some positive results as far as like, it's just a red if lead is there and not red if there's nothing. But it's been an interesting way to be able to see it. It's not quantifiable, but has been something that was affordable for us and something that could be done quickly.
Right. So what we're seeing is that a lot of these methods, as you explained, Mimi, is that people will use them, even the XRF and the hand-bead. The precision, I think, and the accuracy, you still cannot compare to lab. So methods like that are really good for, first go around. Oh, let's see if anything is positive, or let's take a couple samples and see what we get. And if it raises a red flag, like, oh, I think we might have something here, then it might be a good idea to sample the soil properly and send it off to a lab. Sort of like a screening, right?
I wanted to bring two things forward. I put a couple of things on the spreadsheet from the Cornell Soil Health Lab and the Kempf Lab, which are more in the microbial life category. But we did a project with the Brownfields department, who have a whole protocol that I put on that list as well. And during that period, while I was in Baltimore and Detroit, I went and met with a museum restorateur who had this gun that is used in restoring paintings and pottery. That's like a spectrometry gun that does materials analysis. And so I always thought about, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was some kind of a device? And that's the conversation that you guys are talking about with spectrometry. And the nutrient density department at University of Massachusetts / Amherst / MOFGA, or the organic people in Massachusetts, they had proposed an app that would be a nutrient density app for food for moms to know what the Brix is and what the nutrient density is in the food that they're giving their kids. And they were advertising that would be able to also show chemical sprays on the food. And I don't know if it did, but it would be worth knowing what they're saying, because there's a lot of them and they have some credibility. I'm going to go look it up and shut up for now.
Thank you. I'm curious, Jeff, I don't want to put people on the spot, but I know Jeff and others involved with Public Lab have worked on the DIY spectrometry. I'm not sure if there's any updates on how that can be or is being used to detect heavy metals in soils or other, like hydrocarbon contaminants.
Sure.
Are there any updates on that?
I guess I could sort of just give like a brief check-in on it. Like, there was a big project a few years back to do hydrocarbon, kind of like relative, like what Jackie is saying, indicator level. So just to see if there is a likely hydrocarbon in a sample, not like exactly what it is or fingerprinting it or anything, but just whether there is something or not, and also knowing that there are other things that can pass that test that aren't hydrocarbon, but a quick test. And then also some degree of being able to tell between heavier hydrocarbons like crude oil and lighter hydrocarbons like gasoline, diesel, things like that. And I think sort of the big takeaway from that was that when you're comparing between samples, you can distinguish between lighter and heavier if you are really pretty careful about controlling everything in the experiment. It's not a really good enough to like use in the field or something, but if you nail everything down to your table and everything's really lined up and you're being really careful, you can. But then there's sort of a question of like, is how useful, given that it's so sort of persnickety, is that, given that it's only a quick test. But yeah, there was a good bit of work on that, and I think it's been a little bit quiet since then, although our spectrometers are now much better than they were. There's some potential to look into that again. So yeah, repeatability and stability, I think, were the main challenges we found. For heavy metals, the only thing I've seen is people using like a reagent, and that would be sort of like colorimetry, so like something that changes color in the presence of a heavy metal, and then using a spectrometer to measure the change in color. So that you could do it with the naked eye if you have like a color comparison chart, but it does give you somewhat more quantitative results. So for people who want to have a numerical comparison or something, I think there are advantages there too. But I think in both cases, like there's a trade-off between the complexity of setting up your kit and doing a test, given that you're not getting absolute matches or measurements. You're getting sort of a stronger indication that there's something there, but it's not like usable in court. And sort of weighing the amount of work you have to do to get there against what you get out of it. Not to say it's not useful, but I think that's something that's true about any kit, honestly,
Right. I think, Jeff, you made a really good point, is that, every situation is different. So you really have to think about, well, why am I testing the soil? Is it a project? Is it an EJ project where we think there's a local factory contaminating, spewing out soot and contaminating our gardens? Is this data, does it have to be defensible in court? Well, if that answer is yes, you really want to send it to a laboratory. And you want to send it to a certified laboratory, not a university. So, or is the application, is it just my garden in my backyard? I'm just curious. Then maybe something like a colorimeter method would be fine. So each situation is different, and you really need to take a look at the application for each.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do want to note that it's also not mutually exclusive. Even if you are trying to send some stuff to a lab and I'm sure you all know this, but just to, since we're recording it, you can also do a bunch of cheap tests alongside that and shore up your own confidence in it. Or maybe you can only afford to send a few tests to the lab. And you want to do like a couple hundred cheap tests first and select a couple that you're going to send for more rigorous testing. So yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Right, and even if the application is, if I have a huge garden in my backyard, and if I find, you really have to think about, well, what if I find contamination? What is the solution? It's all fine and well, I know I have high lead levels now. Oh my God, what do I need to do? So you really need to think through the whole problem or issue from really, the end, the possible end, to the beginning.
Thank you. Yeah, those are great points. maybe we can drop, if people do know of resources, that piece Jackie just brought up, like, okay, what do you do when you get the results back? Why don't we drop those either into the group chat for each other, or even into the spreadsheet, throw them somewhere, and I'll help organize them so we can all have access to those, because that is a really good piece. And I wanted to like fist pump what Jeff said too. I worked in a lot of projects where we just didn't have funds or budget to do the amount of professional testing we would have wanted to, but we did use either XRF or other methods to screen, where we were able to do hundreds and hundreds of samples, and then we would take 3 of the, whatever our budget was, take 3 of those samples at random and send them to a professional lab, and just be able to say, okay, well, we can say our results actually were within this range of accuracy. So that's another option for people. Okay.
I wanted to just add one thing, that from a soil health perspective, a lot of times the conversation is that even from a minerals perspective, the conventional university soil tests will tell you what's present in terms of minerals in your soil, but they won't, because the solvents are so strong to be able to crack open and expose everything that's there. That's not a good measure of what's bioavailable to your plants in the soil. And so I guess that has a toxicological implication, because the biggest thing that everybody will say is put down a root barrier and put on wood chips and put on compost and try and grow your food away from these other areas, and that compost will help buffer and stop those minerals, those heavy metals from being bioavailable. But there's the soil chemistry layer that is not within the knowledge base of many, many, many practitioners, that I think could be decoded around bioavailability and how strong the acids are. Humic acid is really different from the sulfuric. I think they use sulfuric acid in the soil tests. Again, that's just like a flagging something that I feel like is widely mis or understood.
Right, exactly. So then you have bioavailability. So depending on the environmental toxin you're interested in, what is the bioavailability on it, right? So it might not be so bad. One toxin might not be as dangerous as another toxin. You know what I mean? So it's really, actually, when you delve more into soil testing, like I have in the last year to 2 years, it's like really, it's a lot more complicated than you think. There's all these things about then what do you, and then research center at Duke University, they did a gardening testing research study where they found that the soil that they brought in was just as contaminated as that the soil that was already there. So that's another issue too, is that if your solution is to replace the soil in your garden, that soil that you're bringing in is not contaminated with the same stuff or something else. You need to make sure that it's tested as well.
Yeah, the reason that happens is because topsoil is not regulated in the United States.
Right. Yep. So,
at the cost of everybody who's dropping things in chat, I just want to make sure I have a paper copy, because I'm too rural to support the data usage of doing Zoom.
Yeah.
So, okay.
No worries, Nancy. I'll be sure to share that with you.
Cool.
And while you're here, Nancy, I know you have a lot of experience with all of this, and with that question of like, okay, well, what do you do with contaminated soils? And is there anything you wanted to share about your methods?
I have a lot, so I'm not really sure how to pick and choose it, but I start with, instead of going straight to testing, I start trying to understand the historical usage of site and also what is around it that could have either deposited things from air or come into water, as well as, whatever has been deposited directly on the ground. And so if I know who's around and what kind of contaminants that that factory or what comes down those railroad tracks, whatever is going on, that's a really good baseline of what I can expect to see in soil. I often don't test the soil. I test plant tissue because I'm interested in what's bioavailable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that, I'm looking at roots and where they're occupying the soil, and also whether they're shallow and fibrous or they're taproot, etc. So I'm looking at, before I go in and jump in and test, I think since most sites are not tiny, in one composite test over a site can give you general ideas, but won't get you specific ideas. Being a little bit more thoughtful or aware of where you are in the first place and what's been acting on that site is where we start. So we spend a lot of time researching a site before we even, start making soil tests. And we do a lot of more qualitative work, and that's not necessarily something that's going to show up in contaminants, but it might show how contaminants move in soil, with how that soil is structured, with the pH test, all sorts of other things. So I think that to me, it's more to go at the contamination. It's like, how are you pregnant, as opposed to like everything that like moves up to that point. So I'm interested in that fuller story, that what kind of the backstory, what lies behind things before I even go at those other things. I'm assuming there's going to be contamination of some sort. I don't necessarily need specific numbers because in a lot of ways I don't need it. We just need to know if they're present and how they would be biologically available to plants or livestock or humans. So it's kind of a mouthful, but it's a little different in perspective of where we start before we test.
I want to fist pump that for. I've spoken to a number of old farmers who have had contamination that they never reported or tested, but that they sensed and knew about and remediated by planting beets and then harvesting those beets over the course of 5 years and incinerating all the beets. And I feel like there would be another interesting set of views to chart, because there's a possibility you could grow like a sentinel crop, and then have that because the soil life allows so much more migration to happen through the soil layers, and so there's stuff that starts to become more available potentially over time. ...
Right.
I feel like there's a set of actors that aren't here in this conversation that I want to represent, but I don't want to say what they would say. I just want to say, need to hear what they want to say.
Wait, which set of actors? Other soil scientists, or you mean the microbes themselves?
Oh, the microbes, no.
Oh,
You're saying factors, not actors, right?
Farmers. I thought it would be important to have a couple conversations with some old-time farmers who are, especially like around Ventura, where there's a lot of hydrocarbon contamination and where they've developed some experience and observational data over 40, 50-year careers around impacts of that contamination on their production and how they try to meet.
Thank you.
May I ask a follow-up question on what can the beets do? Are they used just as like an indicator of beets don't grow, soil's not healthy, or are they able to kind of help pull things out of the soil, and then when you burn the beet, you're really doing whatever you're doing to get rid of it out of your soil, at least.
In that story, that was what the farmer said. He said, after 5 years of growing the beets, I felt confident that I could grow other stuff because I had removed, I think it might have been cadmium, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, I guess I'm just flagging another area for research.
Mm-hmm.
I think people use beets a lot for soil structure, not just for microbial life, because they're drillers. And so I think, when someone's weighing something in, it seems intuitive, but comes from years of looking at soil. They're improving a couple things at the same time. They're improving structure and they're increasing microbial life with that. I'm not sure about cadmium in sugar beets, I'm guessing. But I think there's a lot of wisdom there.
Mm-hmm. And I can share some resources. Like, I know Nancy has a manual with a lot of fantastic information on some of these methods of, looking how to find out more about the land history, how to check out soil texture, what plants can indicate about your soil. And I'll definitely throw some resources. I have access to just tables of like, I mean, not that it's because it is complex, it might not be as, I mean, there's complexity, but there is information out there on, if you have lead, you can work with, sunflowers and other plants that are known to help accumulate the lead. There's a bit of information out there on that sort of which plants you can work with those ways.
Well, I think you need to think about exposure too, not just eating the fruits and vegetables from your garden, but in the process of gardening, right? When you're gardening, if the contamination is on the surface and you're gardening and you're bringing that, you may be inhaling, contaminants. Or what about children's play areas, right? That would be, that's a big one, hands and mouth with children. And if they're in if there's contamination in their play area, that's could be a very big concern too.
Great point. Yeah, it's an important consideration, the routes of exposure, for sure.
Other routes of exposure to flag is a lot of places that are doing bioremediation on a grassroots level in cities are using wood chips from street trees, and they're often also using waste cardboard and waste paper, which is recycled other kinds of paper. So, and I guess just two other things to think about as in the kind of comprehensive research project that I hope this turns into, which I volunteer my effort towards, is those remediation strategies. What are the vector possibilities in terms of spraying, in terms of the exposure that those trees, have in their bodies that's now in the wood chips, et cetera, thinking about all the normal vectors that are a part of the life experience of a vacant lot.
I have two questions I'm curious to add in. One is just bringing back up an idea I've been curious about since the call that happened a few years ago that I somewhat remember, but the question is there some simplified or some more accessible method of biologically screening for the likelihood of bioavailable contaminants just by doing something akin to the way pressure is tested for health using benthic macroinvertebrate keys, where it's something that's super public friendly, where you go through and say, there's a count of this many roly-polies, this many earthworms, this many this many that, and so we can say this is in a category 1, 2, or 3, and it's like a first screening step, but looks at soil life, or possibly even looks at soil microscopic life as like a more in-depth version of that. So that's just a question I've been curious about and wonder about. Another one is I'd love to hear about the carbon sequestration that got brought up if there's time.
Okay. can't think I have answers to both of those. So I put something in the spreadsheet that I can pull out and link to in the chat. So it's a tool called microbiometer, or okay, I just sent something. So yeah, this is a pretty low cost and easy to use test to measure the microbial biomass in soil. There's a reagent involved. There's this little calibration card that you will put little droplets of water water that supposedly has all of the microbial life extracted from the soil sample card, and it works with an app, and it acts as kind of like a white balance that a camera would use, and it can calibrate to the card and then just detect different values on where you had dropped the sample onto to indicate the levels of biomass. So part of the carbon sequestering project is to use that on the field, but then run the same test in the lab and just kind of try to validate the efficacy of this and accuracy of the microbiometer. I know it's been used by people. I don't know what most people's experience are with it, but yeah, so I've had some people I know that have used it just, in a place so far from any lab, and had lost some of the pieces to the kit and had to just work with what they had, and was able to still use it because of its simplicity. But again, I guess the jury's still out on how accurate it actually is at this time. But it's super easy to use and pretty fast results. So that's one of the things that this project's been looking at in terms of the sequestering. So they're running lab tests on the total nitrogen that they're finding in the soil, microbial biomass, nitrogen content of just that biomass, microbial respiration, and some things I don't exactly know what they mean, but soil ammonium and nitrate pools, and potential denitrification are some of the other things I was told are happening in the lab. And then some of the more DIY approaches to determining what else is going on. Someone had built a Raspberry Pi with a few sensors that's being placed in some of the beds that these tests are happening in to get the moisture level and the temperatures, and that's regularly being measured and sent to a web server somewhere. And the test is built around different combinations of plants that are being grown that were determined by someone who's working on this project, and just seeing what are the different combinations, what are the different plants that can be grown under these different conditions that are constantly being measured. And long term, after a few years of doing this on various plots, try to get some best practices for how to create a carbon sink. And the soil in this case is also being created from compost created by the New York City sanitation from curbside food scraps, and mixed with some sediment taken from supposedly pure soil taken from a construction site 40 feet deep, meant to be totally contaminant free. And they've mixed that, I think, a third of the sediment in with 2/3 of the compost to create the soil that it's all being done. And so in that case, there's pretty good understanding of what exactly the soil is made up again, to add some control to it all. But that's as much as I know about what they've been doing.
I've used the biometry method, and I like it. It's really good to show relative carbon sequestration, but it's also something that you could just do observationally when you know what plants and diversity of plants, or when animals are present, you can kind of make guesses about where you can find the largest carbon sequestration. So it's a good way to kind of confirm those things that can just be observed if you know your plants and have some ability to read landscape.
Yeah.
I think it's a great test.
What was the name of it?
Easy to use. No, what you're talking about,
Okay, okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah, biometry. Because you work with Brooke and those guys, so I know what's going on with it. Yeah.
Thanks. So it is a little after 11. Of course, if you need to go, feel free to go. It would be neat to sort of wrap up with some, if other people have things to add about Eleanor's question. Just different types of sort of bioassays, like what we can learn from microbes or the plants or the worms, whatever, about our soil. And then, Corey, was there more you wanted to share about the carbon sequestration project?
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on there.
Okay.
And those of you in New York, you should stop by in the spring and the summer. Is going to be at the Hall of Science and at Pioneer Works in Brooklyn. There'll be some public plots with all this is running on.
Cool. So cool. Eleanor, I wanted to share, I do have some info, and I have worked with just simple stuff like using, checking out how many earthworms are present, and or other soil organisms, as there's actually like pretty legit, I'm not sure if it's EPA, I'll have to revisit and see who put that out, but there are like pretty legit measures out there for the ones I saw were related to petroleum hydrocarbons and earthworms, but there's some good info out there on that kind of stuff, as well as you can do sort of some simple bioassays using like planting beans. There's some info out there, like certain seeds are very sensitive to known concentrations of different soil contaminants, and so you can do some cool stuff like that to try to suss out and get a pretty good, ballpark on what the concentrations are of certain contaminants in your soils. So I'll throw those into the document as well. Okay. Is there any sort of burning questions, any other soil analysis topics that we didn't cover that people want to pose as a question before we wrap up?
I just wanted to flag for next call that there's so much pressure for outcomes-based metrics on soil carbon sequestration. There's so much money and excitement. I forwarded Liz Barry a bunch of links about best practice people, but that's a whole track of the work that's really different from the bio-based analysis that Eleanor was bringing up that I really want to affirm, and I feel like somebody like Natalie Jeremchenko could do a very good job of popularizing bio-based metrics. But then the second point would be that in this process, if it becomes a test plus, such that the test is situated within a pedagogy that says, all right, so you have contamination, which is likely to be in some level present. Here's the sequence of, carbonaceous crops that are then composted, that are floristic resource that then, is accelerating soil life towards, viability for gardening. Because, on all of this stuff, the solution to pollution is life. To the extent that we remediate the life in the soil, we are also remediating whether or not we can eat from it. We are remediating the poison. And so I guess I only just would say that in all the way that Public Lab starts to frame this work to try and integrate it with that successional, acceleration of health in land, like land health as a major part of the strategy, rather than like a clinical test or like a click test. I feel like situating that click test within a like rainbow of the other work is important.
Yeah, here. I completely agree. I think there's a lot of qualitative tests to do to assess landscape health instead of just, again, running to presence of contaminants. It's like we're trying to restore landscape health for not just growing, but for filtration of air and water and carbon sequestration. So I think there's a lot there.
Thank you. Those are great points.
Oh wait, I have one more. I'm so sorry.
No, yeah, go for it.
One of the major areas that is contaminated and one of the major impacted areas of land health on our landscape is roadsides, ditches, rights of way, and like sides of highways. And those are highly visible to the public, and those are highly degraded by especially automotive, and like the roadway means there's a concentrated pulse of contaminants hitting a degraded ecology that's then through ditch systems connecting to riparian ecosystems. And those are areas that are often managed by Roundup. And as you know, Roundup is a antibiotic. And so as far as like water infiltration, you know, and soil health and repair, and like just also the like larger project of land repair, those areas are potentially like more public funds could be available in those places. They're highly publicly visible. They're part of like our understanding of the commons. And I feel like the potential for public sphere intervention in those places is really different from EJ type contexts, or, you know, urban gardening type context, or backyard gardening type context. And I feel like it's pretty underexplored in this space. But, you know, that if there's, for instance, the state of California mandates that anytime PG&E rips out flora, they have to replace it with native plants. And that means that there's contracts for native plants that sustain, you know, like 25 nurseries across the state of California are totally and utterly sustained by the PG&E contracts that they have for, you know, bad destructive land practices. So similarly, if there was at a state level a mandate to do this kind of biological repair to mitigate contamination on roadways especially, you know, that could mean a lot of money in this space.
Thank you. Great point. So in terms of next steps, and by a way of sort of wrapping up and closing this conversation for today, I'm not sure how many of you do interact via the Public Lab online website, but there is potential via that platform to contribute to like soil resources. Like, so the table, for example, will go up there. I know that that's not always super accessible to everybody, so I just want to offer, like, if you want to contribute something, feel free to email me. I'll throw my email right now in here, and I can, like, you know, add it up for you. Or yeah, like if there's something you want to work on or try out that you've heard from this call, let's definitely share that with each other moving forward. Again, the Public Lab website is a good way to sort of like to do that.
Is there going to be another call? Or, because I'd love to recruit some more people to your community that you're making. I'm so grateful for everyone listening and everyone speaking and everybody being together.
Okay, saw some twinkle fingers. Should we have another call on this topic?
I mean, yeah, I would say we can always sort of schedule other calls if people are interested, but we do have a weekly call on Tuesdays where people can convene to talk about sort of any topic. So if folks kind of give us a heads up, a lot of times we can just block out time to sort of focus on a particular subject. the Tuesday calls are open to anybody who wants to show up. So, you know, sometimes we end up talking about a bunch of things, but yeah, we're pretty available. So, you know, if you want to kind of gather people, we're ready to, you know, work with you and find a time to talk.
Speaking for myself, it definitely helps to have a dedicated date to block out on a calendar. That even if it's just for part of a Tuesday call, even just saying it would be this Tuesday and specific, I think helps me make the time to show up for something. And I would love to also listen in on a second call or on a follow-up series of calls just to build something or follow what other people have to update about.
So maybe, this is Liz, maybe I can suggest that those of us here on this call that have made commitments to posting things or sharing things or maybe asking our other contacts for more information to then bring in and share here, how many weeks would we like to get some of those points done? And then maybe we could schedule a reconvening after a comfortable period.
I feel like in beginning of May, I'm going to this conference called Earth Repair, which is like 100% focused on remediation and restoration. And I feel like that would be a really good place of bringing more people. That, speaking for myself, that's on May 3rd and 4th. I'll put you the link.
Severin, can I ask about that? Is that the kind of conference where like you might actually be able to pitch a session that remote people could dial into? Or is the schedule already set?
Oops, Severin, I think you're muted.
Oh, bother. They would be open to that. The organizer is wonderful, but I think that, you know, it seems like the process we're in is about discernment and like what are the avenues of research and who has what expertise. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm sensing of where we're at in this process. And if there was if somebody would be my teammate in kind of creating a framework for that conversation, I would be delighted to facilitate that conference. But overall, I don't want to, you know, jump onto that conference and say that's the most important, because I think Eleanor also, I think that there's a lot more like listening and hearing and sensing that she probably wants to go on just even within this group to identify areas for further research.
Thank you. That's great. Did we want to aim for a Tuesday? I guess would it be a Tuesday call in May? Does that work? Okay, some nods.
Yeah, you could either do it for right before, potentially the Tuesday right before May 3rd might see most of the Public Lab staff tied up in a staff retreat. However, it doesn't mean that we can't do a Tuesday call. So if you wanted to bring this group of heads together before that public event, you might look at that. Otherwise, the week after Severin's event, it could be not only a report back from this group, but Severin may have a report back and some new people invited that she has just met. I could see it going either way.
Okay.
Severin, you're muted again, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like May.
I feel like yes, and I feel like yes. I would love if anybody is motivated to like make a set of like framing questions to bring towards that conference kind of in the middle of April towards May, and then after May if we've like more bodies. I basically need to be held to commitments myself. Like Eleanor was saying, it's really helpful to have a deadline because there's so much else going on. But if where there's like a mandate and there's a teamwork and there's a framework, I'm like so keen to like work on this myself.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely happy to work with you on that, Severin.
Okay, great. Well, if just to offer you two as maybe if you two wanted to put your heads together and just need a standing time to do that, you could jump into next week's Tuesday call and feel free to say no, I just suggest things. And then look ahead for maybe get more of us who are here today. And anyone else we already know who might be interested could look at the Tuesday, April 30th call. And actually, the staff should be available then. We'll actually be done with our staff meeting by then. So Tuesday, April 30th could be a target. And then let's see, clicking ahead one more week, Tuesday the 7th would be right after Severin's event.
I'd be happy to show up for something this next Tuesday to also just weigh in or listen or think about what you all are framing. That's a time I could be available. And then the other ones I'm also open, so that's just for my part.
Awesome.
Also, in the meantime, I was going to say, and Severin, this could be helpful for you in networking with other people, but to get people to start following the soil tag on Public Lab. That way, when anyone posts an update or anything going on related to soil, they'll get an email notification. Because otherwise, there's not like, for a lot of the other issues and ideas on Public Lab, there are email groups, but we're moving away from those, and soil doesn't actually have one, which is a great opportunity to get everyone into one sharing space. So you can follow it by going to the tag, which I dropped in the chat. And then the other thing is, I just dropped a link for the open call because it's on a different line, but that line is always the same. So that's the page where we store that information too.
Thanks, Stevie.
And Danielle or whoever, since I don't have a pair of eyes on the screen right now, I'm looking at plants in a greenhouse. Can you make sure I get this in some way? I'm going to have to jump off and get back to work.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
I'll send this stuff to you. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so it sounds like Eleanor and Severin and I and anyone else who wants to join next Tuesday, we'll just start framing some questions, and then we'll follow up with the group via Public Lab, and I had emailed some people. So however you heard about this in the first place, expect to hear back about a follow-up group sort of conversation at the very end of April or early May. Okay, thank you all so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, one more thing. Sorry, me and my problems, including surveying everyone that we talk to at all times. Here, I've just dropped into chat a quick SurveyMonkey link. Who doesn't like radio buttons? No, but please, we'd really, really love to hear back from you. We're always trying to tune our in-person events, whether they happen in real space or virtually. So please let us know what we could do better. And Danielle, could I get your help to get this to Nancy, who I'm not otherwise in contact with?
Yes.
Great. And are you already in touch with Jackie? You could send it to her as well?
I am via the website, so yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Let me email it to Jackie then.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's it for me.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to see some faces.
Thank you.
Nice to see your faces.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.